This chapter will teach you to have delightful conversations like this.
Tiens, bonjour. Ça va?
Ça va bien, merci. Et vous?
Très bien, merci.
Il fait froid aujourd'hui.
Oui, en effet.
Bon, à tout à l'heure.
Oui, au revoir. À tout à l'heure.
Don't worry if the conversation seemed difficult. We'll lead you through it part by part. The way to say, "Oh, good morning. How are you?" is to literally say, "Hold it, good morning. How's it going?" Which is,
Tiens, bonjour. Ça va?
let's learn how to say, "Good morning."
Bonjour.
Do you remember how to say, "Good morning"?
Bonjour.
The way to say, "How are you?" is to literally say, "How's it going?" Which is,
Ça va?
what's the way to say, "How are you?"
Ça va?
Do you remember how to say, "Good morning"?
Bonjour.
What's the way to say, "How are you"?
Ça va?
When you say,
Tiens,
you are saying, "Oh," but it's literally translated as, "Hold it,"
tiens.
is a colloquial way to express a slight surprise and comes from the verb to hold.
Tenir.
Many expressions in French wouldn't mean much when literally translated. For instance,
Ah tiens, ça va?
translates to, "Oh, hi there, how are you?" We don't actually ask the person to hold anything. Nice. Now practice saying, "Oh."
Tiens.
Can you figure out how to say, "Oh, good morning," which will literally translate to, "Hold it, good morning"?
Tiens, bonjour.
Nice. Now practice saying, "Oh."
Tiens.
Okay, now try to say, "Oh, good morning."
Tiens, bonjour.
Do your best to say, "Oh, good morning. How are you?" You are literally saying, "Hold it, good morning. How's it going?"
Tiens, bonjour. Ça va? Bonjour. Ça va?
Is a polite but not stiff way to greet someone. One way to say, "How are you?" is,
Comment allez-vous?
but you are literally saying, "How do you go?" We have different ways to say, "How are you?" in French, from the informal
Ça va?
to the more formal.
Comment allez-vous?
When talking to strangers in France, we always use the
Vous?
form. Do you remember how to say, "How are you?" in a formal setting?
Comment allez-vous?
You can be translated by
tu,
or
vous,
in French,
tu,
is informal and used only with well-known acquaintances.
vous,
Is the polite way to say you when speaking to strangers. We use it all the time in restaurants, shops, etc., to be respectful. If you were in a formal situation, how would you say, "Good morning, how are you?" when you are literally saying, "Good morning, how do you go?"
bonjour, comment allez-vous?
To say hi or bye, you would say
Salut, salut,
is more informal, but is used very often. We use it to both greet someone and say goodbye. Now, how do you say hi or bye?
salut,
Based on what you have already learned, can you figure out how to say, "Hi, how are you?" Literally, you're saying, "Hi, how is it going?"
salut, ça va?
In France, when greeting acquaintances and friends of acquaintances, you usually give a kiss on each cheek, sometimes twice if you're in the South. There's a formal way to say, "Good morning, how are you? What is it?"
Bonjour, comment allez-vous?
Let's hear you say, "Hi, how are you?"
Salut, ça va?
Here's how you would say, "Good evening."
Bonsoir,
Let's see if you can say, "Good evening."
bonsoir,
If you were in a formal situation, how would you say, "Good evening, how are you?" when you are literally saying, "Good evening, how do you go?"
bonsoir, comment allez-vous?
In French, we usually use
Bonjour,
good morning at any time of the day and
bonsoir,
during the evening and night. Good afternoon is not commonly used. There's a formal way to say, "Good morning, how are you? What is it?"
bonjour, comment allez-vous?
Let's hear you say, "Hi, how are you?"
Salut, ça va?
Do you remember how to say, "Good evening, how are you?" in a formal setting?
Bonsoir, comment allez-vous?
Now, let's learn sir. Ready?
Monsieur,
Let's hear it again.
monsieur,
What's the way to say sir?
monsieur,
Now, try your best to figure out how to formally say, how are you, sir?
comment allez-vous, monsieur?
There's a formal way to say, good morning, how are you? What is it?
Bonjour, comment allez-vous?
Let's hear you say, hi, how are you?
Salut, ça va?
Do you remember how to say, good evening, how are you? In a formal setting.
Bonsoir, comment allez-vous?
How do you say, how are you, sir? In a formal situation.
Comment allez-vous, monsieur?
Listen to the way you would say, madam.
Madame,
Let's hear that again.
madame,
Nice. Now practice saying, madam.
madame,
Here's a good question. How would you say, good evening, madam? How are you? In a formal situation.
bonsoir madame, comment allez-vous?
Let's hear you say, hi, how are you?
Salut, ça va?
Do you remember how to say, good evening, how are you? In a formal setting.
Bonsoir, comment allez-vous?
How do you say, how are you, sir? In a formal situation.
Comment allez-vous, monsieur?
Do you remember how to say, good evening, madam? How are you? In a formal setting.
Bonsoir madame, comment allez-vous?
Do you remember how to say, how are you? In a formal setting.
Comment allez-vous?
Now, how do you say hi or bye?
Salut.
Let's see if you can say good evening.
Bonsoir.
What's the way to say sir?
Monsieur.
Nice. Now practice saying madam.
Madame.